Hello, everybody. My name is Kostis Geropoulos from New Europe newspaper. I'm the energy editor. And welcome to our panel organized by Global Strat View and the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. The theme is International Solar Alliance and the quest for clean energy. We're going to discuss how emerging economies like India are taking the lead in sustainable energy solutions. As an energy editor, I've covered renewables quite extensively. And in Europe, with 2030 and 2050, the Europe plans to reduce carbon emissions and become a zero carbon economy by 2050. That means that we're going to have an increased role for renewables in solar, wind, hydro, green hydrogen as well. We have a very interesting panel today. I'm going to start with my first panelist, who is Jagjeet Sareen. He's the Assistant Director General for International Solar Alliance. He's going to be talking to us more from an international perspective. How can solar energy play a key role in reducing emissions and also in helping reach a zero emissions economy? Jagjeet, the floor is yours. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you to you and to National Press Club and Global Strat View for inviting us, International Solar Alliance, and putting this theme on International Solar Alliance and clean energy transition. Let me begin by maybe bringing your audience up to speed what ISA is and what we do and how important this initiative is for energy transition at large and the net zero commitments countries are taking. International Solar Alliance was put together as a multilateral initiative led by Prime Minister Narendra Modi of India and then President Hollande, who was also the presidency of Climate Change Conference in 2015 in Paris, supported by a number of global leaders and UN Secretary General, putting this idea together that solar endowment is huge in countries within the tropics. If you look at the band of Mother Earth within the tropics, the sun endowment is huge. But their ability to leverage or utilize the solar energy has not been that sufficient to meet their either energy access, energy security, or energy transition needs. So this idea was put forward as a more South-South multilateral platform where countries will come together. They would aggregate their demand for project finance and technology. And the secretariat of this initiative, which is ISA Secretariat where I work in, would facilitate financing, technology, capacity building, technical know-how so that countries could translate their ideas about solar projects into concrete projects on the ground. Yeah? Fast forward from 2015, we now have 102 member countries. United States joined ISA in Glasgow COP in November, and then we have Israel and other countries are in process of becoming members. Now, the membership for International Solar Alliance is open to all UN member states. And we've seen many European countries join ISA, Italy, Germany, and others are joining in. Soon, all European member states will be hopefully part of International Solar Alliance. So now let me come to why this initiative is important. If you look at International Energy Agency, which is authority on energy issues in terms of analytics, given they've been at this issue for last many, many decades, and the other international agencies like the World Bank, IRENA, and others, everybody has come to this conclusion that if we are serious about 2 degrees, let alone 1.5, and if you add up all the net zero commitments made by countries in Glasgow, solar technology applications provide more than 50% of the solution. And if you add hydrogen to it, if you add storage, heating and cooling, the offering of solar as a solution goes about to 65%. And then it's wind, offshore, and other technologies. So, it's kind of well established among the thought leaders, thinkers, modelers, industry people who are doing forecasting, that we need to harness solar technology in a much bigger way to solve the energy transition problem if we are really serious about net zero. But more importantly, in ISA's world, we have bucketed world's energy problem or development imperative of member countries in broadly three buckets. First is the energy access bucket. While we are so focused on energy transition and net zero, we can't forget that there are still about 700 million people who don't have access to electricity, none at all. And we can't, in our quest to transition to clean power, just forget about them. And there are all host of issues of migration, conflict, and others which are linked to it. And access to basic electricity should be a fundamental right. Where you and I are using Microsoft Teams with Wi-Fi, our brothers and sisters in Africa haven't seen electricity. So this can't be that unequitable a world. So what we are trying to do at ISA is pushing for solar applications in off-grid space so that these people get access to electricity. Second is energy security. If you look in the Western Hemisphere, in the Caribbean, and close to your neighborhood, countries have access to electricity. Their populations, it's 98, 99, 100% electrified. But their energy security is more dependent on imported diesel, most of it. And it becomes challenging both in terms of from, exchange rate perspectives or just burden on their economies, but also natural disasters blocking imports and all that. So we are trying to see how best we can help with solar. Then let me come to the important point, which is the focus of the panel discussion today, is energy transition. So what we are trying to do is help countries with analytics and advocacy. We have a bumper sticker, if you will, solar for net zero. And the way it translates it, we would be pushing for, as we say, towards 1,000. And that's $1,000 billion of solar investments by 2030. 1,000 gigawatts of new installed capacity of solar, helping 1,000 million people with access to electricity and mitigating about 1,000 million tons of CO2 emissions. So if you put it all together, ISA is moving towards or helping countries move towards 1,000. And that would make a serious dent in solving this issue of energy transition. Let me pause there, and I've put a lot on the table about ISA, but in subsequent rounds, I would elaborate specific pieces of what we are doing, how our countries rating us as an organization, how we are working with others, especially the United States, to take this agenda forward. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the interesting presentation, Jagjeet. And you're right. I mean, as we go on about how to achieve zero emissions, we're going to be discussing among ourselves, and also we're going to have questions from the audience. But it's good to just initially all of us to just set the board and just for our audience to be up to speed. My next speaker is Mr. Llewellyn King. He's an energy expert and the host of the White House Chronicle. Llewellyn, the floor is yours to just, you have a lot of experience in energy.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I think I'll give you a little history tour. I've been covering energy since 1970. I founded the Energy Daily in 1973. So I went through the energy crisis and the beginning of looking at solar as something more than a hot place, hot water solution. I grew up in Africa, Central Africa, and there was very early solar with black pipes on the roof to get hot water. And it worked, but that was the limit of solar. In the 1970s, we started looking at solar in a different way. And the US government, through the national laboratory system, which is fairly extensive, there are 17 national laboratories, but not all of them got involved, but many of them got involved in looking at solar power. Particularly, I had a lot to do with solar power at Sandia National Laboratory, normally thought of as a weapons lab, but in fact, they did a great deal of work in energy, as did other labs, particularly actually the big weapons ones, which were not focused on weapons, but exclusively at all. The first ideas were that we'd use mirrors and solar towers. One was built, a big plant was built at Barstow in California, a smaller one at Sandia National Lab in Albuquerque, New Mexico. But gradually it became clear that photovoltaics were far superior and that you could use them in many places in many ways. And initially they were deployed probably for small usages like traffic lights in remote areas, or you needed a little power in a remote area. And gradually they have become a critical part of the electricity mix. But I think even there you have to make a differentiation between putting photovoltaic cells on the roof of a house with a battery to be more or less self-sufficient to utility scale solar. Utility scale solar is really what we're all looking at, because that makes a big difference, the amount of electricity, excuse me, which can be delivered. And utility scale solar is very cheap, very desirable, but it has a limit, and that is we do not have efficient energy storage on a scale to compensate for the amount of utility scale solar which is being deployed, particularly in the southwestern desert states. So we have what has become known as the duck curve. If you think of a duck, you've got a tail, you've got a head, you've got the back, and then you've got the belly down there. Well, that's the duck curve. And the problem is that the high points of electric consumption in the US are at breakfast time, which generally is in the early morning before the sun gets up, and very heavily, much more so in the evening when people get home, turn on the stove, turn on the television, turn on the air conditioning, you know the whole picture, when the sun is setting. So in order to make good use of solar, we have to concentrate on storage, and storage has been very difficult. Batteries give you expensive storage. Solar's cheap, batteries are expensive, but a drawdown time of about 4 hours. It is very inefficient to try to store very large quantities of electricity by battery. Ergo, we look at other things. Hydrogen is promising, but it's embryonic. We don't have an efficient technology for cracking water to produce hydrogen. The easiest way to get hydrogen is actually to reform natural gas, but that defeats the purpose if you're going to use natural gas. So you have to look for green hydrogen, which is hydrogen that comes from some source, primarily water. And that technology is probably further advanced in Europe than it is in the US. There's a lot of experiment and a lot of hope going into hydrogen as a storage medium, and then ways of storing hydrogen are also on the table, including ammonia as a host to hydrogen in large quantities. So we have a problem, overproduction in the I don't know the name of the place, but in the southwest of the United States, solar power at midday is of no value. It is a de minimis value. A megawatt or kilowatt simply has no market. The answer is probably not immediately in storage, but immediately in much better transmission. We have to improve the transmission lines running east to west. Most of the transmission lines in the US that make up the US grid run north to south. So you've got a series in order to get the full benefits of utility scale solar, we need a variety of things. We need better storage of all kinds, including batteries and where possible pumped storage. We need to develop hydrogen, and we need ways of moving the power across the country. We have time zone differences, which could be advantageous, because if you could get the power that is still being generated by solar, say in Colorado, and get it to the East Coast, bump it to the East Coast, you would have a solution. You would have an abundance of power. The lines don't exist. They have to be installed. The new administration, the Biden administration, has money for this. transmission is one of its key interests. It has said so. But transmission is very difficult politically because you have to put lines through people who get no benefit from them. The producer is in one state, the consumer is 5 states over, and all those states along the way say, why should we bother? Why should we have lines running through? Why should we have transmission towers in our beauty spots, etc.? This is not peculiarly an American problem. It's a fairly global problem. But the answer is that solar is one of the great assets we have. Solar electricity from photovoltaic cells is cheap. We know how to make it. We know how to deploy it. We need to find out how to move it around quickly and cheaply and how to store it. It is one of the great benefits for mankind, and it is definitely a huge benefit in fighting carbon in the atmosphere.
Thanks, Llewellyn. I'm glad you brought up storage because actually one of our stories this week is, Maros Sefcovic, the VP of the Commission. He's a part of the European Energy Battery Alliance, and he was talking about the need for storage and also for Europe to develop its own storage facilities and not also rely so much on batteries from, let's say, China or other countries as well, but develop its own. So we can actually, we're going to go ahead and discuss this later also, as well as, the role of hydrogen, as you mentioned, and in able to store solar energy. My next speaker is an expert about India, which is one of our countries of interest in this panel and discussion. Ms. Neelima Jain, she's Deputy Director and Senior Fellow at Wadhwani and Chair in the U.S. Policy Studies of CSIS. Neelima, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Kostis. Thanks for the opportunity, and thank you to the rest of the panelists for their great interventions. I will very briefly talk about what India has been doing and what the emerging trends has been and where we see the role of organizations and forums like ISA playing a key role in terms of just propelling developing countries in their in their journey of energy transition. So India has been punching above its weight as far as the addition of renewable energy capacity is concerned, despite continuing to balance the developmental and social needs of a large and complex, developing nation. The installed capacity of renewable energy overall has increased to about 220+% in last 4 years. And solar power capacity alone has increased more than 11-fold in the last 5 years. India's clean energy got more loans than coal for third year in a row. And falling costs of renewable energy sources is already undercutting that of new and some of the existing coal-fired power plants. There has been a very strong policy support by the government, which has been, been a driving force behind the adoption and addition of clean energy sources. And the country has done remarkably well as far as aspects of energy access equation is concerned. So in the last 3 years alone, India added about 28 million new households, aspects that Jagjeet touched upon and which are very relevant for a developing economy. India has run some very large energy efficiency demand side program, which is a key aspect of the energy access equation and often understated element of the overall clean energy ecosystem. But having said that, the country is commencing on one of the fastest rural to urban transition in the human history. There is no playbook for this. No one has done this before. And its green transition can take multiple paths. It can go the Amsterdam way or it can go the San Francisco way. So the decarbonization cost can run into trillions. And also the steep grid decarbonization can come at a domestic developmental cost. So the country needs to focus on, integrating, of course, renewables into the national grid, but also accounting for the social and economic impact of decarbonizing the existing assets. Supporting large-scale capital reallocation, because access to finance still remains a larger challenge in the clean energy system, and managing the near-term increase in input costs. Because of the supply chain disruptions, because of what technologies may evolve, and the kind of cost that they may throw in. And in such instances, bodies such as ISA can serve as an excellent forum for coordination, collaboration on a full range of program development and support and implementation issues to promote effective and efficient energy transition. Decision makers in India, and not just India, in other developing countries, are interested in learning about global best practices from other geographies. And there are useful lessons, that can be learned from the successes and failures of countries in diverse geographies around the world. And ISA is very well positioned to plug that gap. With that, I'll stop and look forward to further conversation.
Great. Thanks so much, Neelima. And before we go, we have already some questions from the audience, but I wanted to ask first, in terms of, go back to what Llewellyn was saying about energy storage. And I wanted to ask Jagjeet, in terms of how developed is we have the technology right now, but we need the energy storage. We need also the interconnections to a transmission network to be in place. Is the development of both, solar energy and at the same time, storage facilities going at the same speed so that there is no lag, and also we don't have, we have a kind of a smooth transition from fossil fuels into more, renewable energy, and especially solar, which is what we're talking about.
Sure. Thanks for that question. And in our thinking, there are 4 things happening simultaneously, and these trends would help us expedite the energy transition. One is, of course, the massive deployment of solar, the utility scale, which my fellow panelists talked about. And, contracts have been templatized, risk management frameworks, risk management instruments have been now honed, refined. Private sector knows how to deal with it. Governments know what they have to do. So there is a better understanding that we've gone through the learning curve, if you will, in India and other major economies in developed world, how to do, hundreds of megawatts or even gigawatt scale. We have seen recent projects or tenders awarded even in Middle East, UAE, Saudi Arabia, and others, where gigawatt scale is happening, utility scale. So that's one, but still leaves the open question of the 24/7 availability of renewable, essentially solar, how you do it. Because till we get to that point, the replacement of coal with wholesale solar remains a question for countries like India and many others. That brings us to the storage question. I'll start with the battery storage, and of course, there is some component of pump storage there. We have a partnership with the World Bank Group, and they forged this, battery partnership with a variety of stakeholders. In India, it's Niti Aayog, SECI, Solar Energy Corporation of India. Globally, they have a number of partners, essentially to push for battery storage at a utility scale level. While, we also push storage at the off-grid space, so, the access issue also gets resolved. But we are trying to work with a variety of partners, financiers, technology providers, developers, asset owners to see, how best storage, battery storage could come along. In India, contracts have been issued for 24/7 plans, solar plants with storage and all that. So, but it's a work in progress. Cost curves are improving, and we have seen technological breakthrough as well. molten salt batteries. We saw, Microsoft and even Reliance and a few other coming together and pumping in couple of $100 million in technology, which MIT people have developed, and others. So I think variety of innovations will come in this space in terms of efficiency, cost curves, size, scale, deployment, and its spread in other countries. Related is the grids. I don't know if your audience would be fully aware, but at Glasgow, we, ISA, along with the presidency of the COP, UK government, came together and launched this initiative, which is mouthful of initiative, frankly. It's called Green Grid Initiative, One Sun, One World, One Grid. Prime Minister Modi took the baton again and announced this as a global initiative. Essentially, the idea is green the grids, have these grids within countries, from east to west coast of your end in India, covering east and west of India and interconnecting various regions, and help in using solar as a battery. See, I'll give you an example to make it a bit more practical for your audience. When it's peak or demand load in India between 6 p.m. to 9, sun is almost setting or has set, but in Middle East, it's still shining. So if you could connect Middle East solar power to India, either through a land route or through a submarine HVDC cable from Oman coast to the coast of Kutch in Gujarat, the west coast, you could actually meet the peak load of India through electricity, solar electricity coming from Middle East, starting from Oman, but then whole GCC is connected. Similarly, you could use solar as a live battery if you could connect India to ASEAN. And we have the time difference and the peak load difference. And at that point, excess solar electricity could go both sides, east and west of India. So, with launch of this initiative, again, by Honorable Prime Minister Modi, in collaboration with PM Johnson and with the support of United States, Secretary Granholm is on the ministerial steering committee of this initiative. Same as Minister Taylor from Australia, Minister Pampoli from France, and hopefully Germany would be joining this initiative soon at a ministerial level to drive it politically. This initiative has the support of all ISA member states, now 82, who have ratified and endorsed this initiative. Essentially, what we are going to push is have these grids first connect within the country, then within the region, and then regions connecting with each other. It's not going to be a one cable going around the globe, but you can think of it as an interconnector of interconnectors, a grid of grids, various grids coming together. And pumped in a lot of renewable energy. For us, it's solar, but we are very open to pushing other renewables in combination with solar. So that brings the third element for energy transition. And fourth is hydrogen. And again, my fellow panelists mentioned about it. At ISA, we are looking at this very seriously. In terms of solar hydrogen, you can use excess solar with electrolyzer to produce hydrogen when you have excess solar and store it, use it for industry, use it for SMEs and for transport sector, big industry, what have you. We are even testing business model at an SME scale. Could you use solar energy with a modular electrolyzer to meet the industry need at a very localized level? We know the cost is about $5, a unit of hydrogen, and it has to come down to $2 or $3. And solar can really help. So, just to summarize what I'm saying here is utility scale solar is happening. It is happening now in a much faster pace across geographies. But we need to expedite more the storage and interconnection of grids so that we could take this electricity to far and beyond, and also see how hydrogen could fit in this combination. And at ISA, we are working on all these four fronts with our member countries. And with United States joining ISA, this has been a shot in our arm, given a lot of new technologies are coming from United States, and your DFC, the Development Finance Corporation, has a big agenda on these issues. And, Special Envoy Kerry has taken on himself to push for energy transition, supported by President Biden. And we are forging a very close partnership with the United States government across the board to push this agenda. Thank you.
So when you're mentioning, given with Vice President Timmermans, he's it seems like hydrogen is like the golden bullet in a way, and a lot of of the green hydrogen is going to produce from solar and wind. Do you see a really increased demand for solar, and how is able the industry to cope for in terms of that increased in demand
So, ultimately it will come down to cost and its usability for various sectors. So, transport, could we mix this with CNG and, use that? Can big industrial sectors start using hydrogen at a scale where it makes more sense? In terms of production, I think people are still competing for gray hydrogen and green hydrogen. In Europe, we see, some people are still betting on that, you could have LNG turned into hydrogen and then use gas pipelines to get that flowing across Europe, even from Russia to Europe and all the rest. It will compete with green electricity going through the grids. We at our end are doing a thorough economic analysis of it in terms of what it means for various sectors, what it means in terms of its production cost, what it means for its modularity, where it could be made available at a in scale, even at a SME level, small and medium enterprise level, through solar, where you generate hydrogen there and then consume, so you don't have to ship it across or transport it across. But it remains very important, and for Europe, and just for your EVP, Mr. Timmermans, he was at our last governing body meeting, our General Assembly, and made a strong pitch for pushing solar for hydrogen, and European Union also, or Commission, has committed some modest euros to advocate for this agenda with ISA as well. European Union and him in his leadership role is working with ISA, and we with him very closely on these agendas. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, there are quite a few issues that arise with hydrogen. First of all, policymakers tend sometimes to forget that hydrogen is not the equivalent of natural gas. It is a different product with different characteristics. It has much lower energy content. The energy density is about 1/3 roughly of that of natural gas, which means that you have to modify turbines, etc. Secondly, if you are going the hydrogen route, you put solar power in competition with wind. Suddenly it isn't a solar to hydrogen, it's a which renewable is the cheapest way of making hydrogen. And I haven't seen good analysis of that, but it puts it, the Europeans, for example, are working very, very hard in the North Sea wind farms to convert them to hydrogen production, or to give them hydrogen production as an option. Hydrogen also is not an easy gas to handle. It has a very high flame rate, which means it's explosive. It has a small molecule, which means it has to be treated much more carefully than, say, natural gas, otherwise you get leakage. It's going to be a difficult transmission, but the main thing for solar enthusiasts to look at is at what point does it go into competition with wind and as a source of production, and which one is economically the more advantageous. I have no idea, and I don't think there is any good data on that, but it's something to be borne in mind. The whole issue of storage, the cheapest storage we know, the most efficient we know, is pumped hydro. It's very inexpensive. The problem is there are limited sites and there's environmental opposition, and of course, initial cost. You need a good reservoir to pump from and a good reservoir to pump to. After that, it's very efficient and very reliable. On batteries, it should be borne in mind that batteries are not very good as a daily use. They're a great emergency source of electricity. But if you're going to run them down routinely every day, build them up, charge them with when the solar power is available, and then run them down in the evening, you put a stress on them that will shorten their lives quite considerably and their efficiency. Now, all of these things will improve with the time, But as of now, that is a consideration.
Neelima, is there a plan with, for example, for India, where to transform old coal plants and use them, for example, as solar plants now, or for storage, or
I've heard of them. I've heard of them being used for hydrogen plants. There's some attempts to do that. There are no shortage of solar sites in the US, particularly in places like Arizona, where you've got large desert areas. Little more difficult on the East Coast, where land is of greater value, both for farming and for other uses like residences. There's some pressure on utilities not to take good arable land and put solar farms on them, but the options for solar are just so fabulous. Every building, you could put them over railway tracks, you could put them along highways. I don't think that is a problem. Siting is not an insuperable problem, as siting is for transmission, which is a lot more difficult. People don't want high power direct current or alternating current, it doesn't matter, lines running through their neighborhoods. They just don't want. But I think that Jagjeet is so right when he says networks connected. In the US, we're now looking at connecting basically the eastern network to the western network, maybe into Texas. We've got to be able to move the power. If we can move the power, solar becomes absolutely invaluable, and I think is assured.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I've seen, when I was in Amsterdam at the top of the Okura Hotel, they had all solar panels. But at the same time, we were also in Ouarzazate in Morocco, which is, they have built like this huge solar plant. So there's
the largest in the world, I think, in Morocco, or it was. They're building these things so fast.
It's pretty amazing. Neelima, in terms of, U.S.-India cooperation, how is it? Is also exchanging technology and discussing also between the two countries, or also companies investing in both ways.
So Kostis, I think I have to say in the last 1 year, especially with the new administration, the levels of integration and cooperation on energy among different agencies within the two countries have been very encouraging. It's not just at the policy level, but there is finance, there is technology. So the full ecosystem and all aspects of the ecosystem are being discussed at the moment between the two countries. You did bring up, question on coal and sort of transitioning or replacing some of the existing coal plants to more clean energy solutions. Now that's an area where US and India cooperation could clearly help, because US has at least policy levers for finding the right economics in terms of doing that transition. But let's just take a step back, in the developing or in the developing context of India, right? Like, though fossil fuel power generation is gradually losing share, it still dominates the country's power mix, and India's reliance on thermal energy generation is significantly higher than its global peers, accounting for about 85% of energy generation versus the global average is close to 60%. So the need will more be around how do we provide affordable, equitable energy access while transitioning into this low carbon pathway, and of course the integration of renewable into the grid will require, among other solutions, better storage systems. But what is also important is just building in that additional resilience and responsiveness, to the electricity distribution infrastructure. Now, the supply chain, as far as storage is concerned in India, deals with several challenges. One is the limited supply chain of electronics. There is lack of relevant skill set or workforce. The regulatory and the trade environment is evolving, and it continues to evolve. And then there is low consumer awareness, right? So to address these challenges, the Indian industry needs to leverage the experiences of peers from the United States. They need to look at how diverse their supply chain can get. Also, the evolving geopolitical tensions have strained supply chains across the world. I mean, if you look at India alone, China dominated the supply chain as far as solar PV was concerned, cells are concerned, because India does not really have wafer industry. It does not work in the upstream or midstream of these value chains, and that's where collaboration with industry, with government in the US could help India prepare, at least in the midterm, not in the short term, because it's going to take a while, at least in the mid and long term.
Yeah, you brought up the issue of geopolitics and energy security. That's also another issue, is like how, we experience that one now in Europe, and I mean, and around the world with high energy prices. And a lot of people are saying, okay, the energy transition is, for example, I'm based out of Athens currently, and Greece has decided to phase out all its coal power plants, and there's a lot of criticism that they actually did it too fast. And now with this recent cold wave that we got, there was no, and the prices were already high enough. And I wonder also, I mean, in the US, there's been a whole cold spell. How is this now in terms of, in a country like Morocco or even Greece for most of the year, which is very sunny, and you have ample solar energy. But in terms of places where it, now with climate change, also it becomes more of an unstable climate. Can solar actually meet the demands? Is it, or is, you need like an energy basket with everything pretty much to have a security of supply?
Absolutely. Well, my simple answer to that is solar alone is not a solution, right? It needs to have all the other ancillary elements for solar to work. And Jagjeet brought in a very important point around pricing. Price will drive the markets in the developing countries, and I'm sure in the developed world as well. India remains a very cost-sensitive market. And that's precisely the reason it is difficult for India to wean away from coal. Because again, India is not endowed by the abundance of the bridge fuel like gas, right? So what is that bridge fuel? And that bridge fuel has to be storage, has to be solar, has to be integrated solutions, and that entire solution portfolio. But often neglected aspect of this is, apart from the policy and the market framework, the private sector, the industry, will really pull the weight. And I think it's very important that there are initiatives that can enable these innovative supply-centric business models that hopefully can go beyond the existing geopolitical tensions. A diversified supply chain is important, because our energy future actually depends on mining. It's a controversial statement to make, but it's right. Most of the raw materials that exist are concentrated on very few parts of the world. And I think we will have to, from forums like ISA, we have to find a more sustainable, equitable solution for long-term supply chain issues.
I would like to.
Yeah, I was going to go to you actually, because the geopolitics, and I was thinking,
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mr. Chairman.
No, I was actually, I'm going to ask you, Llewellyn, to say about
I wanted to say that when you're talking about storage, one of the easiest ways to get storage is because you have the infrastructure in many countries, certainly in the US, but in Europe as well, is to use natural gas as a storage medium for occasional use. And this is working. I've worked with a number of utilities and studied them. They've gotten through, we had this big storm, which was disastrous last February of last year in Texas, but which other parts of the country that were affected with the same storm were able to keep their gas flowing and use gas de facto as the alternative. It is a here and now storage option. But of course, when you are drawing down on gas, you are putting carbon into the atmosphere, much less than you would put in with coal, and other pollutants are fewer. By the way, there is there's a NOx problem with hydrogen when you burn it. It's not a totally perfect fuel. There is always a price. If you were to ask me personally, what would I advocate? I would advocate standby gas, not burning it very often, but having it because it's load following, it comes on quickly, and of course it's now very proven technology. However, this is unlikely to get political support because it is not 100% movement of hydrocarbons.
Yeah, well, Lynn, in terms of the raw materials, is it also? I mean, is it still like huge reliance on China in terms of getting solar panels and getting materials for for the solar energy?
I think Neelima is so right. I think she is so absolutely correct. It all revolves around mining and our ability to produce enormous quantities of lithium, of course, but many other things to keep the alternative energy going. Just in a windmill, for example, the deployment of rare earths is quite large. Rare earths are a great multiplier. The average, say, 2 megawatt windmill would produce maybe half a megawatt if it weren't for the rare earth use. So we are dependent on supply chains we've never been dependent on before in parts of the world that we've never looked to for essential commodity materials for the future of energy, which is another reason not to totally abandon the infrastructure you have, but to put it in standby.
Neelima, in terms of energy saving in a country like India, for example, I mean, solar can also, I mean, this is one way of reducing CO2 is to consume less energy, but is there, for example, in Greece, a lot of solar panels for heating a house, I mean, the water and so forth are subsidized by the government, some with EU money, but some also from just the, by the government here. Is there that kind of plan now in India in terms of to save more energy and kind of make people invest in actually consuming less energy, but with developing solar, having solar panels or heaters?
Yeah, I have to say, Kostis, as far as energy efficiency is concerned, India is clearly far ahead of the curve, right? With or without solar. For the last 15 years or so, India has been driving a lot of policies and a lot of large-scale programs in the field of energy efficiency. So solar is one, but then usage of energy-efficient appliances and then integrating them with solar or clean energy solution presents an excellent solution for not just clean energy or low emission pathway, but just reducing the energy intensity overall. One of the programs that India ran, which is now become a global success, is around lighting. At some point in time, I remember maybe in 2012 or 2011, 80% of the lighting applications in India were met by incandescent bulbs, which are 80% more inefficient than your usual LED bulbs. And India ran this massive program, which was more market-driven than subsidy-driven, which resulted into India's position in the overall manufacturing of leads from I don't know, zilch to now 13 or 14%. It became the second largest market after China. And the penetration in terms of lead bulbs, just that sheer transition or jump from incandescent to lead was done in mere 3 years. So India has the advantage of scale. And if that scale is put to good use in terms of aggregation, then it results in economies of scale. It results in low procurement costs, and it has shown that technologies like lighting can come at parity. And I think that's what we should attempt to do when it comes to integrating solutions like solar plus energy efficient appliances. Now, there's one area where we need to do more, and that is cooling. India is a tropical country, and what is said is that at least 80% or 70% of urban India is yet to be developed. So the kind of cooling load that would strain the energy systems in India is unfathomable. And so I think integrating clean energy solution with highly energy efficient cooling technologies would be one critical solution that India have to look at. And just like India, I mean, if cooling is the need, I'm sure heating then becomes very energy intensive in cold countries. So there are several synergies to explore despite different contexts. And like I said earlier, solar is not the only solution. Solar needs to be mixed with several other elements within the basket to make sure that we have a very powerful sort of solution package for this very ambitious energy transition journey that countries like India will undertake.
Jagjeet, if you want to take that in a more international perspective in terms of energy saving and solar.
Yeah, definitely. But let me begin from where she left this example of aggregation and what Energy Efficiency Services Limited in India did with LED aggregation and bringing the cost down. So we took a leaf out of that and tried the same model in aggregating solar water pumps demand from countries in Africa. If you look at the kind of opportunities a solar water pump can bring in enhancing agriculture productivity, increasing the income of farmer household, and all the positive spillovers from there, it's phenomenal. So what we did was ask for demand of solar water pumps from our member countries. 21 of them, largely from Africa, provided their demand in terms of what they could potentially launch as a national or a subnational provincial scheme, like Kusum in India to promote solar water pumps, a variant of that. And that led to aggregated demand of close to 300,000 solar water pumps. We put out a global price discovery tender asking a variety of bidders, Indian, non-Indian bidders who put together solar water pumps, is to put out a price for demand per country, and within country, a variety of pricing structures, delivery at the port, delivery at the farmer's gate, and with 4 or 5 years of maintenance guarantees and all the rest. And to our surprise, that while this was not assured demand that countries are actually going to buy, the prices we discovered were about 40 to 50% lower than prevailing prices in Africa. And we did a thorough market research, sent teams to 10 countries to understand what is driving the price, would aggregation help lower the price and all that. So now some countries are using ISA's discovered price as a benchmark price with their aggregated demand to get economies of scale going. And this is just one example. Then we are trying to see this whether solar home systems, similar aggregation could work. Rockefeller Foundation, the US-based big foundation, tested this aggregation model in Ethiopia with batteries. They brought about 50% price reduction gains by aggregating the kind of batteries and other components required for the massive mini-grid scale-up they want to do. Essentially, the point there is that this South-South learning, what India has gone through in the last few years is very instructive and experience for other developing countries. States like Madhya Pradesh, which did the big, solar, mega solar utility scale power plant, Riva. Madhya Pradesh is like in their development imperative and various indicators, economic, social, education, this, that, and governance, could be like one country in Africa. So how Madhya Pradesh did, they could easily emulate in Uganda, Rwanda, and maybe in Ghana. So the point I'm making is we, ISA as an international platform, are promoting such experience sharing, transfer of knowledge, bringing policymakers together, training them together so that there is organic exchange of this knowledge and experience. Trust me, I'm a World Bank civil servant seconded at ISA. When we go and tell policymakers, do this, they think this is World Bank again, telling us how to do our things. But if an Indian bureaucrat who has done it in his home state, him or her state, talks to his peer, let's say in Zambia, that guy listens because they share the same experience, pain, and solutions, and they get it done. And so that's the kind of thing we are doing here. And talking about, energy efficiency, of course, Neelima, I agree. Solar is not the magic wand that would solve all our problems. But solar in combination with other technologies, with other applications of the scale and modularity it can present in both off-grid and on-grid space, I think it could be the solution we need now to scale up. Because one thing is for sure true, if solar is out of the equation, we can touch this whole energy transition a goodbye now at this panel. So of course, it has to be part of a package, but it's an important element in the package. And if it is not there, then good luck. Let me pause there.
Yeah. I mean, there are some places, like when we went up to Pyhäjoki in Finland, for example, which is minus 30, and they have like 3 hours of sunlight during the winter. I mean, that you cannot rule out solar. But I was wondering, are there also some places where there's like a huge challenge? Because when we went, for example, to Qatar, and we saw that they actually, even despite the huge amount of natural gas they have, they still, rather sell it to other countries and, gradually kind of make the transition. But we went out in the desert and they're facing huge challenges in terms of, because of the heat is too big, with 50 degrees of continuous sunlight. Are there, is this like specific to the other major challenges for, to have, to develop? I mean, you have different kind of technologies for different countries, right? In terms of solar in panels. Right?
Yeah, so let's take example of Germany, which began with this big rooftop solar experiment, and at a mega scale. Everybody thought, and I have lived in Bonn in 6 years, sometimes for many months, the sunlight is only little you get. And thinking of massive rollout of solar rooftop, like 10, 15 years ago, people were wondering, are Germans really serious? They're pumping so much subsidy in it. But the efficiency of panels is much more than what we are getting here. So, and the way they've utilized balance of systems and storage and this and that, and it became a huge success. And a lot of lessons for other countries. The technology provider have been exporters. Now we have seen, bifacial solar panels with huge energy efficiency improvements in terms of the kind of electricity it generates. Now vertical panels are coming to meet the challenge of space constraints. You have agro PV, you could have crops below, solar above. We have floating solar, space constraints go. You could have a hydro solar hybrid right there with the floating solar on the reservoirs of dams. So the point I'm making is, for different circumstances, solar technology is evolving in its modularity, in its application, in its efficiency. And with grids coming in, big and small, efficient, and synchronized in HVDC alliance. I think there are a lot of improvements happening where you don't need actually solar there, but you could have it somewhere else financed by this person, this state, this country, and import it. So I think technology and ingenuity of engineers, I think, is going to solve all this on a technology side, on business model side, on regulatory side, and countries are making good progress on that.
Yeah, experienced that in terms of Morocco and Spain. Actually, when we went there, we saw that there was a lot of interconnection there, and exchange of energy. Actually, there's a question from the audience, and I think it addresses it's to Jagjeet, because it says the U.S. was initially reluctant to join the International Solar Alliance, and only joined last year. What is the reluctance for countries such as the U.S. to be part of a movement towards sustainable energy solutions?
Okay, so let me kind of unpack this question in three parts.
Yeah.
So when ISA was being conceived or negotiated as an international platform, and the Treaty of ISA, under President Obama's administration, US was corely engaged in those negotiations, putting the political consensus behind getting it launched in Paris in 2015. So I would say US was corely engaged, not a reluctant player, but working very closely with France and India to get the coalition of countries together and get it launched. And then we had administration in US. We all know they had a particular view on issues related to climate and clean energy at large in terms of the international commitment. So ISA was not the only institution where they were a bit slow in joining. They even withdrew from many other climate bodies. And I don't have to go in explaining, your audience is fully aware. But with Biden administration coming in, we have seen them warm to ISA very quickly, and now they have become a member of ISA. So by no measure, I would say US is a reluctant player when it comes to either solar agenda or working with ISA. And even domestically, the commitments we have seen on solar in this administration are huge. And the grid expansion connecting east to west and the benefit of solar moving across coast to coast, this could bring phenomenal dividends for energy transition. So, one has to see with a slightly bigger time slice in the little journey of ISA. ISA is still a baby organization. We are not running yet, we are walking. So in last 5-7 years, we have seen US fully in, bit out, more generally, and now fully back in. And we are working not just with the government, but with the private sector in the United States, with USIBC and USCF and others, and chambers of commerce, and Ivy League University, MIT, Harvard, and others on technology, Berkeley Lab, and East to West Coast think tanks, foundations, CSIS, Brookings, and others. So, for us, it's United States, not just government, but all the players, stakeholders supporting this agenda, and at various levels of ISA as an organization, we are engaging with these stakeholders very closely. Thank you.
There's one more question, and it kind of goes to what Neelima was saying earlier about cost. One member from our audience says, I live in the Pacific Northwest and have solar panels on my house. We use solar energy for all our energy needs at home, and it's great. However, isn't there a problem with lower pay scales for workers in solar energy as compared to the coal industry? And how can that be overcome? I don't know who would like to jump in.
I can answer that in part, and that is unionization. The coal industry, there are a lot of unions. There are no unions in the solar industry. Wages are lower. It's a pretty straightforward equation. There's been a long history of unionization, particularly in deep coal mining, and therefore coal workers are better paid. And solar tends to recruit as it goes. There is no history of long history. A lot of people who come into the solar industry have come in from construction, from other activities, and have taken the work available and the money available, and it's inadequate.
I could speak to India's experience, and as Llewellyn very rightly mentioned, there is a long history. If you look at just how many people are employed by the coal sector in India, it actually comes to about 4 million. 4 million Indians are employed either directly or indirectly in the coal sector. There are about 736 districts in India, and almost 40% of those districts have some coal dependency. Then there is also a long history around subsidizing coal, and a lot of that subsidy gets routed into workforce payment, etc. So I have to say it's a difficult question to answer. The context changes from country to country, and I think that is exactly why getting a commitment on phasing down the coal and sort of reducing the subsidy or redirecting that subsidy into the clean energy sector by the governments, by the states, is very crucial.
We're going to be wrapping up pretty soon. Where I'd like to end my panels is, since I have such great panelists, is if from what we've been discussing so far, if between you there was some questions that you have for the other panelists, or anything that as a discussion. I mean, people were jumping in anyway, and we're talking, which is great. Is there something that that Jagjeet said, or Llewellyn, or Neelima, and that you have for each other? Anything?
Yeah, I have a question for Neelima. India also has a very vigorous nuclear program. At some point, nuclear can be a competitor to solar, not only at the cost of kilowatt hours, but in the production of hydrogen. For example, a nuclear, say 1,000 megawatt nuclear plant, it's a steady state operation. You have surplus power in the middle of the night, etc. Are you considering that when you're looking at India is one of the few countries that truly, India and China are the two countries with hugely vigorous nuclear programs. Do you see that impacting the development of solar, or coming into the marketplace in competition at some point?
I don't see that competing with solar, but I have to say it has been accounted for in the latest national energy policy, which is a good news. I think the long gestation period, the skill set, the supply remains a constraint. But having said that, if I look at the policy landscape at the moment, it's not discounted in the overall energy mix. But I haven't really seen very ambitious targets on the nuclear as well. So I don't see it competing, at least in the next 10 years. But given the ambitious targets that India has set itself up for, it's an evolving space. It might change. And also, I think as we discover prices of different technologies, this may again, get mainstreamed into the overall policy discourse. I'm hopeful.
Jagjeet, any thoughts?
Well, it's not a question, but rather, any thoughts my fellow panelists might have on this issue is this whole point around, in global discourse, we hear that there are trillions going green, asset alliance and this and that, whole Wall Street looking at climate risk. But what is your sense of the absorptive capacity of the countries where all this has to be deployed? Where are these billions, or rather trillions being talked about? They're going to go. Are there enough deals in the pipeline which can absorb all this, or we should be looking at a different model than just the pace at which we have been to this problem? Just wanted some reaction. We may only have 2 decades or 3 at best to solve all this. Are we up for it as things are?
Should I?
I'll have a go at that.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's not an easy one. I'm not sure that we are up to it. I think it takes a lot more energizing of the world. I mean, energizing morally, get from here to there. And whereas you can get a certain persuasion, it's very hard to implement when the economics are in play or when employment is in play. If you are working in the coal industry, for example, it's very hard to persuade somebody working in the coal industry, as I have tried to, that this is not good for humanity and we should stop doing it. They have their livelihood and their entire personality, and I know a lot of miners is tied up in the production of coal. So the changeover comes best when it is not political, but when it is economic. Coal has been phased out largely in the US, not totally by any means, but it's going quickly for economic reasons, not for political or social reasons, which makes it a lot easier. Coal is no longer competitive with wind, solar, and presumably new small modular reactors. That makes that a lot easier. It certainly isn't competitive in the US with natural gas. But if you don't have the economy making the decisions, if the decisions are made politically, there is opposition, and there's also a lot of phony science to support the opposition. It's not easy, and your question is very challenging.
Neelima?
Well, I have to say I'm very encouraged that bodies like ISA are raising questions not on the capability of mobilizing the finance, but on the capability of utilizing the finance. So I'm glad that that we are talking about the other end of the story. And I can only speak to India's experience, right? So we talk a lot about building back better, but I think when it comes to countries like India, it's about building basics better. There remains several impediments to clean energy investments. Having said that, India has seen a lot of investments within the clean energy sector in the last 3-4 years. But I think the onus is also on the government to create more sustainable financing and marketing mechanism to absorb this finance. I'll give you one example. One of the greatest impediment to clean energy investments in India is India's power distribution sector, right? The sector loses about $0.05 on every unit of electricity sold. Why? Because there are subsidies, there are high power purchase agreements, and the sector is financially constrained. So unless you have the end use, a robust end use of the generating capacity, it would become very difficult to create a pipeline which is shovel ready and is ready for investment. And that's just one example. I'm sure that there are economies who struggle with several, some of these fundamental challenges. And that brings me to the point that, especially for developing economies, it's a double challenge, right? It's not just about building the entire transition, the fundamentals of the transition framework better, but also then leaping ahead into that clean transition energy and pace up with the rest of the world. And I think that's exactly where international collaboration should play a very crucial role.
And on that very optimistic role, I think I want to thank all my panelists for this great discussion. It was really informative for me as well I'm looking forward to continue this discussion in the future. I'm sure, renewable energy and as Jagjeet said, it's now, in the next 1, 2, 3 decades most, we have to kind of zero out emissions. So it's kind of a one-way road, and I think solar energy will play a key role in the energy transition. Thank you again, all of you, for participating in our audience. You can also, later on, kind of visit and view the discussion, and also follow us on social media. Thank you very much. And I want to thank also Global Strat View and the National Press Club in DC. Bye-bye.
Thank you for hosting us.